Malcolm Washington stood in the jetway, his first-class boarding pass rejected, watching white passengers board freely. The airline had no idea their humiliation of America's most innovative black tech CEO would spark a revolution that would transform not just one company, but the entire industry forever. Before we dive into this incredible story of transformation, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button to join our community of story enthusiasts. Now let's discover how one man turned discrimination into an opportunity for nationwide change. Malcolm Washington was not a man who accepted limitations. At 42 years old, he had built Quantum Leap Technologies from a small startup into a tech powerhouse, specializing in revolutionary AI algorithms for transportation logistics. His journey to success had never been easy, but his determination had always been unstoppable. Growing up in South Boston, Malcolm had been raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. Despite the challenging circumstances, Diane Washington had instilled in her son an unshakable belief that education would be his ticket to a better life. She'd been right. Malcolm's natural aptitude for mathematics and computer science had earned him a full scholarship to MIT, where he graduated at the top of his class. But even with an impressive degree in hand, the early years of his career had been marked by constant battles against racial barriers. Job interviews where he was clearly the most qualified candidate ended with rejections. Ideas he proposed in meetings were ignored until white colleagues repeated them. Promotions went to less experienced peers, while he was told to be patient and wait his turn. Rather than accepting this reality, Malcolm had channeled his frustration into creating his own path, starting Quantum Leap Technologies from his apartment with just 2 computers and a vision he had worked 18-hour days for years. His breakthrough algorithm for optimizing transportation routes had caught the attention of several major shipping companies, providing the foothold he needed to grow his business. Now, a decade later, Quantum Leap employed over 300 people and had revolutionized logistics across multiple industries. The company's latest innovation promised to transform air travel efficiency, potentially saving airlines millions in fuel costs while reducing carbon emissions. The presentation Malcolm was traveling to San Francisco to deliver could represent the biggest deal of his career, a potential contract worth billions. The importance of this meeting was precisely why Malcolm had purchased a first-class ticket on Skyline Airlines weeks in advance. The 5-hour flight from Atlanta would give him crucial time to review his presentation and arrive rested and prepared. He'd chosen Skyline specifically for their reputation for punctuality and their convenient arrival time in San Francisco. On the morning of his flight, Malcolm dressed with particular care. His charcoal gray Armani suit was impeccably tailored, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. The platinum watch on his wrist had been a gift to himself when Quantum Leap secured its first $1 million contract. His leather briefcase contained his laptop, tablet, and the comprehensive data that would support his presentation. Everything about his appearance conveyed success and professionalism. Arriving at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport 3 hours before his scheduled departure, Malcolm moved efficiently through the terminal. Yet even here, in one of the country's busiest airports, the subtle microaggressions began almost immediately. At the check-in counter, the agent glanced at his first-class ticket with barely disguised surprise. "You're flying first class today, sir," she asked, emphasizing the word "you" in a way Malcolm had heard countless times before. "Yes," Malcolm replied, evenly maintaining his professional demeanor despite the implied question of whether he belonged in first class or could afford such a ticket. The agent typed, slowly examining his ID longer than necessary, before finally tagging his luggage with the priority labels reserved for first-class passengers. "Enjoy your flight," she said, with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Malcolm had long ago mastered the art of not showing his frustration at such interactions. He'd learned that displaying anger would only reinforce negative stereotypes, so he simply nodded and moved toward security. Despite his TSA pre-check status, Malcolm was pulled aside for random additional screening. He watched as white businessmen with pre-checks sailed through without a second glance while he was patted down thoroughly, his electronics swabbed for explosive residue, and his carry-on items examined piece by piece. "Just protocol, sir," the TSA agent said unconvincingly, when Malcolm politely questioned the thoroughness of the random check. By the time he was cleared, Malcolm had lost 20 valuable minutes. He made his way to the gate, convinced that the worst of the travel indignities were behind him. Skyline Airlines was known for its premium service in first class, and Malcolm was looking forward to having time and space to focus before his important meeting. As he arrived at the gate, Malcolm checked his watch. There were still 45 minutes before the scheduled boarding time. He found a seat near the gate desk and opened his laptop, reviewing key slides from his presentation. The terminal bustled with the typical pre-flight activity: families wrangling children, business travelers on calls, gate agents preparing for boarding. Malcolm barely noticed when the first boarding announcement was made, calling for passengers needing special assistance. He continued working until he heard the call for first-class boarding. Closing his laptop and gathering his belongings, he felt a moment of anticipation. Despite the minor annoyances so far, he was still on schedule and would soon be comfortably seated, able to prepare for the opportunity of a lifetime. What Malcolm couldn't have known as he approached the gate was that this routine business trip was about to become the catalyst for a transformation that would reach far beyond his presentation in San Francisco. The next few minutes would set in motion events that would change not just his life, but an entire industry's approach to equality and service. First-class passengers for Skyline Flight 1527 to San Francisco, you may now board, announced the gate agent over the intercom. Malcolm gathered his briefcase and boarding pass, joining the small line forming at the priority lane. 3 white passengers ahead of him were processed quickly, their boarding passes scanned with friendly efficiency by gate agent Diane Reynolds, a woman in her mid-50s, with carefully styled blonde hair and a practiced customer. Service smile. When Malcolm stepped forward and presented his boarding pass, the transformation in Reynolds' expression was subtle but unmistakable. Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of scrutiny as her eyes darted between the boarding pass and Malcolm's face. "Sir, there seems to be a problem with your ticket. Could you please step aside?" Reynolds said, her voice loud enough to be heard by nearby passengers. "What kind of problem?" Malcolm asked calmly, already recognizing the familiar scenario unfolding. "The system is showing an issue. I'll need to verify your booking," Reynolds replied, without making eye contact already, motioning to the passenger behind Malcolm to step forward. Malcolm moved to the side as instructed, watching with growing frustration as the remaining first-class passengers, all white, were processed without delay. Not a single other passenger was asked to step aside for verification. "Excuse me," Malcolm said, after several minutes of being ignored. "Could you please tell me specifically what the issue is with my ticket?" Reynolds glanced up with visible annoyance. "Sir, I've called my supervisor. You'll need to wait." 5 more minutes passed. The economy passengers were now beginning to board, while Malcolm, with his valid first-class ticket, remained stranded at the gate desk. He pulled out his phone and checked his booking confirmation email, confirming what he already knew: his ticket was legitimate, paid for, and properly issued. Finally, Supervisor Gregory Bennett approached a tall man with a receding hairline and an air of authority in his Navy Skyline uniform. Rather than addressing Malcolm directly, Bennett conferred with Reynolds in hushed tones, occasionally glancing in Malcolm's direction. "Mr. Washington," Bennett finally said, approaching with a clipboard, "I understand you're trying to board in first class." The phrasing instantly set Malcolm on edge. "I'm not trying to board in first class. I purchased a first-class ticket weeks ago." Bennett's expression remained skeptical. "Our system is showing you booked in economy. Do you have proof of your first-class purchase?" Malcolm opened his Skyline app, displaying his mobile boarding pass clearly marked first class. He also produced the confirmation email showing the first-class fare he'd paid. "This could have been modified," Bennett suggested, the implication clear in his tone. "Let me check our main system." As Bennett tapped on the computer, flight attendant Patricia Miller approached from the jetway. She whispered something to Reynolds, who nodded and whispered back. Though Malcolm couldn't hear the entire exchange, he clearly caught Miller saying maintaining our standards in first class. The implication was unmistakable. Malcolm took out his phone and began recording. "I'd like to be clear about what's happening here," Malcolm stated calmly into his phone. "I purchased a first-class ticket. I have documentation proving this. Every white passenger with a first-class ticket has boarded without question while I'm being told there's a system error. This is textbook discrimination." Bennett's head snapped up at the word discrimination. "Sir, there's no need to make accusations or record this. We're simply trying to resolve a ticketing discrepancy." "Then resolve it," Malcolm replied firmly. "I have a confirmed first-class seat assignment. I paid for first class. I expect to fly in the seat I purchased." A small crowd of waiting passengers had begun to observe the situation, some with uncomfortable expressions, others openly staring. The final boarding calls were now being announced. After several tense minutes and a hushed phone call that Bennett made to someone he referred to as management, he turned to Malcolm with a tight smile. "Mr. Washington, we'll allow you to board now to prevent further delay to the flight. However, we'll need to seat you in economy as our first-class cabin is now fully occupied. We can discuss compensation upon arrival in San Francisco." "The first-class seat I paid for is occupied," Malcolm challenged. "According to our system, yes," Bennett replied, avoiding eye contact. Left with little choice, as the final boarding call was announced, Malcolm reluctantly accepted the economy boarding pass thrust toward him. As he walked down the jetway, the frustration and humiliation burned in his chest. Boarding the aircraft, Malcolm was directed to the right toward economy, instead of left toward first class. As he passed the first-class cabin, he glanced at the seats and froze momentarily when he saw an empty seat with a card clearly displaying Washington M. The seat he had paid for was not occupied at all. Flight attendant Miller quickly moved to block his view. "Sir, your seat is in economy. Please continue moving to allow other passengers to board." Malcolm took note of the empty seat number before proceeding to economy, where he was crammed into a middle seat between two uncomfortable-looking passengers. Throughout the flight, the service he received was noticeably minimal. Flight attendants avoided eye contact, took longer to respond to his call button, and offered him beverage service last in his row. 5 hours in the cramped seat gave Malcolm plenty of time to reflect on what had just occurred and to formulate his response. By the time the plane landed in San Francisco, what had begun as an all-too-familiar experience of discrimination had crystallized into something else entirely, an opportunity to create lasting change. The cramped economy seat felt like a physical manifestation of the barriers Malcolm had faced throughout his career. To his left sat an elderly woman who had fallen asleep almost immediately after takeoff, her head occasionally lolling onto his shoulder. To his right was a businessman who had claimed both armrests and spread his legs wide, encroaching on Malcolm's already limited space. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. Even when he paid for his fair share of space, others felt entitled to take it. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Malcolm attempted to work on his presentation, but the confined space made it nearly impossible to open his laptop properly. Giving up, he pulled out his phone instead and began to reflect on the pattern of similar experiences throughout his successful career. There had been the real estate agent who had shown him only homes in predominantly black neighborhoods, despite his budget allowing for properties in any area he desired. The luxury car dealership where salespeople had ignored him until he mentioned he was prepared to pay cash. The restaurant maître d' who had seated him near the kitchen despite numerous better tables being available. Each incident, though different in specifics, carried the same underlying message: you don't belong in these spaces. Malcolm pulled up his email and found a message from his longtime mentor, Dr. James Turner, sent just yesterday wishing him luck on his presentation. Dr. Turner, now in his 70s, had been one of the few black professors at MIT when Malcolm was a student. He had guided Malcolm through numerous challenges, both academic and personal. One piece of advice had always stuck with him. Sometimes progress requires more than patience. Sometimes you must force change. Those words resonated differently now. Throughout his career, Malcolm had chosen his battles carefully, focusing his energy on building his business rather than fighting every instance of discrimination. But perhaps, Dr. Turner had been right. Perhaps some battles needed to be fought not just for personal vindication, but for systemic change. Malcolm reviewed the video he'd recorded at the gate. Watching it objectively, the discrimination was clear, though delivered with the thin veneer of policy and system errors that made it difficult to prove in traditional ways. He noticed details he'd missed in the moment, the way Reynolds had scanned other passengers' boarding passes for barely a second while scrutinizing his. For nearly 30 seconds, the whispered comments between staff, the explicit bias in their assumptions about his ticket. Opening his browser, Malcolm began researching Skyline Airlines. What he found troubled but didn't surprise him. Multiple social media threads detailed similar experiences from minority passengers. Several discrimination lawsuits had been quietly settled out of court over the past decade. The company's diversity statistics, buried deep in their annual report, showed dismal representation at executive and management levels. Most tellingly, Malcolm found a recent interview with Skyline CEO Harrison Phillips in a business magazine where Phillips had dismissed discrimination claims as isolated incidents and suggested that some passengers misinterpreted standard procedure as something more nefarious. The dismissive tone made Malcolm's blood boil. As the flight attendants began their drink service, skipping Malcolm's row initially until he raised his hand to get their attention, he made his decision. This incident would not be brushed aside with the typical corporate apology and voucher for future travel. He would use his position, his resources, and his expertise to create lasting change. During the flight's brief stopover in Denver, Malcolm stepped into an airline lounge using his premium credit card access and made several calls. First to Jordan Blake, head of his legal team, outlining the incident and requesting immediate research into similar cases against Skyline. Next to Amara Johnson, a former airline executive who had left the industry after hitting the glass ceiling, now working as a consultant. Finally, to his executive assistant rescheduling his San Francisco presentation for the following week, this new project would take precedence. By the time Malcolm boarded the connecting flight to San Francisco, he had the outline of a plan he was calling Operation Altitude. It would be a multi-pronged approach, legal action yes, but also technological innovation, public awareness, and corporate accountability measures that could transform not just Skyline, but the entire airline industry. As he settled into another economy seat, this time on the aisle at least, Malcolm reflected on the irony of the situation. Skyline had denied him his rightful seat, thinking he was just another passenger they could mistreat without consequences. They had no idea they'd just discriminated against someone with the resources, knowledge, and determination to completely reshape their industry. The final hour of the flight, Malcolm sketched out the components of Operation Altitude in precise detail. This wasn't just about one humiliating experience or one airline's discriminatory practices. It was about creating a new standard for how companies viewed and treated all customers, regardless of their race. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Malcolm looked out the window at the city lights below. This wasn't the trip he had planned, but it might ultimately prove far more significant than the business deal he'd come to negotiate. Sometimes, transformation came from unexpected places, even a denied first-class seat. The morning after the incident, Malcolm sent a detailed complaint email to Skyline Airlines' customer service department from his hotel room. He outlined the events precisely, attached his boarding pass confirmation, and requested a formal explanation of why he had been denied the first-class seat he had purchased. He deliberately sent this from his personal email rather than his company account, curious to see how they would respond to Malcolm Washington without knowing his position as CEO of Quantum Leap Technologies. The response came within an hour, a clearly automated acknowledgement. Dear valued customer, thank you for sharing your concerns with Skyline Airlines. Your feedback is important to us. A customer care specialist will review your inquiry within 3 to 5 business days. Fly higher with Skyline Airlines. By mid-afternoon, a second email arrived. Dear Mr. Washington, we sincerely apologize for any inconvenience during your recent journey with Skyline Airlines. After reviewing your case, we understand there was a system error that resulted in a seating misallocation. As a gesture of goodwill, we have added 5,000 bonus miles to your Skyline Rewards account. We hope you will fly with us again soon. Best regards, Tammy Rodriguez, Customer Care Team. The generic response, with no acknowledgement of the discrimination he'd faced, confirmed Malcolm's suspicions about how the airline handled such complaints. While he had been waiting for this predictable corporate brush-off, his team had been busy implementing the first stage of Operation Altitude. At precisely noon, Malcolm had posted a carefully edited 3-minute clip of the incident to his personal social media accounts, which had modest but respectable followings. The video showed the clear discrepancy in treatment between him and other passengers, including the empty first-class seat with his name on it. He included no commentary beyond a simple caption number, "First class while black, my experience with Skyline Airlines yesterday." Within hours, the video had been shared thousands of times. Civil rights activists, celebrities, and business leaders had amplified it to millions of viewers. By evening, mainstream news outlets were running the story, and number "First class while black" was trending nationwide. Have you ever experienced discrimination when traveling? Comment number 1 if you've been unfairly treated by an airline before, or number 2 if you've witnessed someone else being discriminated against. Hit that like button if you believe companies should be held accountable for discriminatory practices, and subscribe to our channel for more stories about standing up against injustice. Do you think Malcolm should accept Skyline's bonus miles as compensation, or does he deserve more? Let's see what happened next. Inside Skyline Airlines headquarters, alarms were going off. The PR crisis team had been summoned to an emergency meeting in the glass-walled conference room overlooking the Atlanta skyline. The company's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. Customer service lines were jammed with callers asking about the incident. Several corporate clients had already reached out, expressing concerns about their business relationships. "It's just another entitled passenger trying to get an upgrade," CEO Harrison Phillips said dismissively, leaning back in his leather chair at the head of the conference table. At 63, Phillips had been with the airline for over 30 years, rising through the ranks during an era when diversity initiatives were considered optional public relations exercises rather than essential business practices. Allison Parker, the recently hired head of customer experience, cleared her throat nervously. "Sir, I don't think we should dismiss this so quickly. The passenger in question is Malcolm Washington." "Am I supposed to know who that is?" Phillips asked with a frown. "He's the founder and CEO of Quantum Leap Technologies," Parker explained, sliding a tablet across the table with Malcolm's corporate biography displayed. His company revolutionized logistics technology. They're worth over $2 billion. He was likely flying to San Francisco to meet with United Continental about their new efficiency algorithm that could save airlines millions in fuel costs annually. Phillips' expression changed slightly as he skimmed the information. "So he has some money and connections. That doesn't change our response. We've dealt with complaints from VIPs before." With all due respect, Parker continued, "This is different. The video clearly shows discriminatory treatment. It's already been viewed over 3 million times. We're seeing cancellations and our stock price has dropped 2% since the market opened." 2% is nothing, Phillips waved his hand. "It'll bounce back once this blows over." Derek Mason, Skyline's legal counsel, joined the conversation. "I'm concerned about potential legal exposure here. This isn't our first discrimination complaint. And those previous settlements included NDAs specifically to avoid this kind of public relations situation." The discussion was interrupted by Phillips' assistant rushing in with a printout of a breaking news alert. Former Skyline employees speak out about systematic discrimination following viral video. The article featured quotes from 3 former flight attendants and a gate agent alleging that the airline had unofficial policies about monitoring and sometimes downgrading minority passengers in premium cabins based on complaints from high-value customers who felt uncomfortable. "This is getting out of hand," Phillips muttered, his dismissive attitude beginning to crack. Draft a statement blaming this on a computer glitch and miscommunication. Offer him a full refund and some extra miles or whatever it takes to make this go away quickly. Parker attempted once more. Sir, I strongly recommend we take this more seriously. This isn't just going to disappear with a standard response. Mr. Washington has the resources and platform to make this a much bigger issue if he chooses. Fine, Phillips conceded. Reach out to him privately. Offer a first-class round trip anywhere we fly and a sincere apology. Include an NDA, of course. By evening, Skyline's official statement had been released. Skyline Airlines is aware of a situation involving passenger Malcolm Washington on Flight 1527. We deeply regret the inconvenience caused by what appears to have been a computer glitch combined with miscommunication among our staff. Skyline Airlines is proud of our commitment to treating all passengers with respect and dignity regardless of background. We are conducting a thorough investigation of this isolated incident and will take appropriate measures to ensure similar situations do not occur in the future. The statement only fueled more outrage, with social media users quickly pointing out that the response failed to acknowledge the clear discrimination shown in the video and offered no concrete steps for addressing the underlying issues. Meanwhile, Malcolm received a private email from Skyline's executive offices offering a significant settlement package that included first-class tickets, hotel accommodations, and a substantial cash payment along with a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent him from discussing the incident publicly. Malcolm declined the offer with a brief response. I'm not interested in being silenced. This isn't about compensation. It's about accountability and systemic change. That evening, Skyline's board of directors held an emergency conference call. Several members expressed serious concerns about the company's reputation and the potential long-term financial impact of the situation. While Phillips insisted the controversy would blow over, others weren't so sure. Harrison said, board member Elizabeth Frost, "The world has changed. We can't handle these situations the way we did 20 years ago. I'm concerned about your approach here." "I've been running this airline successfully for over a decade," Phillips replied defensively. "I think I know how to handle a PR hiccup." What Phillips and the board didn't yet realize was that Malcolm Washington wasn't interested in creating a hiccup. He was planning an earthquake that would reshape the entire landscape of the airline industry. And Operation Altitude was just beginning. At precisely 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 48 hours after the incident, Malcolm Washington stood at a podium in a San Francisco hotel conference room packed with journalists. Camera flashes illuminated his composed expression as he prepared to transform a personal humiliation into an industry-wide revolution. "Good morning, Malcolm," began his voice steady and authoritative. 2 days ago, I experienced something that millions of Black Americans and other minorities face regularly when traveling: discrimination disguised as policy and system errors. Today, I'm not here to simply complain about that experience. I'm here to announce a solution. The room fell completely silent as Malcolm unveiled the first phase of Operation Altitude. I'm launching an initiative called Equal Altitude, dedicated to combating discrimination in travel. This will not be merely another awareness campaign, but a concrete, multifaceted approach to creating measurable change within the airline industry. Malcolm outlined the 4 pillars of Equal Altitude: accountability, technology, legal action, and industry reform. Then came the announcement that sent shockwaves through the business world. Effective immediately, my investment group has begun purchasing significant shares in Skyline Airlines with the intention of becoming a major stakeholder. I don't want to simply boycott this airline. I want to transform it from within. The journalists erupted with questions, but Malcolm continued methodically through his presentation. Additionally, today we are filing a class action lawsuit representing hundreds of travelers who have experienced similar discrimination. Our legal team has been inundated with cases since the video of my experience went viral. On screens behind him appeared statistics from a preliminary study conducted by his data team, showing patterns of discriminatory treatment across multiple airlines, with Skyline having particularly troubling numbers. But legal action alone is insufficient, Malcolm continued. That's why Quantum Leap Technologies is developing a new app called FairFlight that will allow travelers to document and report discrimination incidents in real time, creating a transparent accountability system across all airlines. Malcolm then introduced Amara Johnson, the former airline executive who had left the industry after encountering her own glass ceiling. With 20 years of insider experience, she had agreed to serve as Chief Strategy Officer for Equal Altitude. The current systems allow for too much subjective bias in how passengers are treated, Johnson explained to the captivated audience. We're developing technology that will remove these subjective elements from booking, seating assignments, and service delivery, creating a more equitable experience for all travelers. The press conference lasted just under an hour, with Malcolm answering questions with the same precision and strategic thinking that had made him successful in business. When asked if he was just seeking revenge against Skyline, he smiled. This isn't about revenge, it's about reform. Skyline has an opportunity to lead the industry in addressing these issues. I'd prefer to work with them rather than against them, but I'm prepared for either scenario. What the public didn't see was the meticulous planning that had gone into Operation Altitude. While Malcolm had been seated in that cramped economy section, his mind had been formulating not just a response to his own mistreatment, but a comprehensive strategy to address a systemic problem. His legal team had already been collecting testimonials from hundreds of travelers who had experienced similar discrimination, forming the backbone of the class action suit. His tech developers had been working around the clock to create a prototype of the FairFlight app. His investment team had quietly begun acquiring Skyline stock through various channels. The original investor presentation in San Francisco, the reason for his trip, had been postponed but not canceled. To Malcolm's surprise, when he contacted the potential investors to reschedule, they expressed even greater interest in working with him after seeing his response to the Skyline incident. Your handling of this situation demonstrates exactly the kind of innovative problem-solving we want to invest in, the lead investor told him during a phone call. Plus, the publicity hasn't hurt. Everyone's talking about Malcolm Washington and Quantum Leap Technologies now. Indeed, the media coverage had been extensive. What might have been a small story about one man's experience with airline discrimination had transformed into a major business and social justice narrative. Malcolm was being hailed as both a shrewd businessman and a civil rights advocate, labels he accepted with careful humility. I'm simply doing what anyone in my position should do, using the resources at my disposal to address an injustice that affects millions, he told a prominent business magazine that requested an interview. The alliance Malcolm formed with civil rights organizations and travel advocacy groups expanded the reach of Equal Altitude beyond what he could have achieved alone. By the end of the week, he had meetings scheduled with 2 influential senators interested in increasing oversight of the transportation industry. Skyline's initial dismissive response had backfired spectacularly. Their stock had continued to fall, dropping nearly 15% in 3 days. Corporate clients were publicly reconsidering their contracts. Celebrity influencers were posting about switching to other carriers using the hashtag number #GroundSkyline. When Malcolm returned to his hotel suite after a long day of meetings, he found an email from Dr. Turner, his mentor. Malcolm, I've been watching the news with immense pride. This is exactly what I meant about forcing change using your position not just for personal success, but to create pathways for others. You're not just taking your seat at the table, you're rebuilding the entire room so more can enter. Keep going. The turbulence you're creating is necessary for a smoother flight path for future generations. As Malcolm prepared for bed, his phone buzzed with a notification. Skyline Airlines had just announced a comprehensive new diversity training program for all employees. He smiled to himself. It was a start, but nowhere near sufficient for the transformation he envisioned. Tomorrow would bring the next phase of Operation Altitude, a meeting with the engineers, developing the bias-free booking system that would set a new standard for the industry. Malcolm set his alarm, knowing that the real work was just beginning. The journey from discrimination to transformation had only just taken off. The ripples from Malcolm Washington's bold response to discrimination quickly became waves crashing through the entire airline industry. 2 weeks after the incident, the transformation was already far beyond what anyone at Skyline could have imagined. The morning began with a CNBC interview where Malcolm calmly explained the Equal Altitude Initiative to a national audience. By noon, Skyline stock had dropped another 7%, bringing the total decline to over 20% since the incident. The financial impact was impossible for other airlines to ignore, though their responses varied dramatically. Astral Airways, Skyline's largest competitor, initially attempted to capitalize on the controversy with a hastily launched advertising campaign featuring diverse passengers enjoying premium cabins with the tagline, "Everyone flies first. Class with us." The transparent opportunism backfired when Malcolm's data analysis team released their comprehensive industry report later that same day. The report, compiled using anonymized booking data, passenger complaints, and first-hand accounts, revealed disturbing patterns across all major carriers. While Skyline showed the highest rate of discriminatory incidents, none of the airlines emerged unscathed. Astral Airways' data showed they were nearly as problematic, just more subtle in their discrimination techniques. "What we're seeing isn't isolated to one airline," Malcolm explained during a press conference releasing the report. "It's an industry-wide culture that needs industry-wide reform." The Department of Transportation, responding to mounting public pressure and the comprehensive data, announced a formal investigation into discriminatory practices across all U.S. carriers. Secretary James Morrison issued a statement, "The concerning patterns identified in recent reports require thorough examination. All Americans deserve equal treatment when traveling." Flight attendant unions, initially hesitant to get involved in what they viewed as a management issue, changed course when several members came forward with their own stories. Sofia Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran flight attendant, revealed in a viral social media post how supervisors had pressured crew members to provide different levels of service based on passengers' perceived status and background. "We were told to be more attentive to certain passengers and to monitor others for potential issues," Rodriguez wrote. The criteria were never explicitly stated, but the implication was clear from the examples used in training. Her post prompted a flood of similar testimonials from flight crew members across multiple airlines. The Flight Attendants Association issued a statement supporting crew members who spoke out and calling for comprehensive reform of training protocols. "Our members entered this profession to provide excellent service to all passengers," Union President Diane Taylor stated. "We stand firmly against any policies or practices that compromise this commitment to equality." As public scrutiny intensified, industry insiders began leaking internal documents. An anonymous source provided Malcolm's team with memos from Skyline's marketing department discussing strategies for maintaining premium cabin atmosphere, with explicit instructions for gate agents about which passengers might disrupt the first-class experience. The most damaging leak came 3 weeks after the incident, an audio recording of a Skyline training session where managers instructed gate agents to find creative solutions when certain non-traditional premium passengers attempted to access first-class lounges or seats, even with valid tickets. Tech companies that had partnerships with Skyline began distancing themselves. Innovatech, a major software provider, announced it was reviewing its contract. Greenstride, an environmental certification organization, suspended Skyline's sustainability rating pending review of their business ethics. Harrison Phillips, Skyline's embattled CEO, made his first major public appearance since the controversy began on Financial Network's The Bottom Line. The interview quickly became disastrous. "Don't you think this whole situation has been blown out of proportion?" Phillips asked the interviewer defensively. "We're talking about one seating mishap that's being used to paint an entire company as racist." When shown clips of multiple similar incidents reported since Malcolm's video went viral, Phillips dismissed them as copycat complaints from people looking for free upgrades. The interviewer pressed him, "Your company's own internal documents show patterns of discriminatory treatment. How do you explain that?" "Those documents are being taken out of context," Phillips insisted, his face reddening. "Every airline has policies about maintaining standards." "And what exactly are those standards?" Mr. Phillips, the interviewer, asked pointedly. Phillips' fumbling response sent Skyline's stock plummeting another 5% before trading closed that day. Inside Skyline's headquarters, an emergency board meeting was called. The atmosphere was tense as board members reviewed financial projections showing potential losses in the hundreds of millions if the situation continued. "We need to take drastic action," board member James Richardson stated bluntly. "Harrison's response has only made things worse." "I've built this airline from a regional carrier to a national player," Phillips responded angrily. "This will blow over if we just hold our ground." "That's not what our data suggests," countered Eleanor Phillips, the founder's granddaughter and a usually silent board member. "We're facing a fundamental shift in consumer expectations. Either we adapt or we become irrelevant." The board voted 8-3 to form an emergency leadership committee to manage the crisis, effectively sidelining Phillips without formally removing him yet. Meanwhile, Malcolm's prototype solution was gaining traction with smaller carriers. Horizon Air and Pacific Connect regional airlines with reputations for innovation expressed interest in piloting the bias-free booking and service system developed by Quantum Leap Technologies. "We've always prided ourselves on treating customers equally," Horizon CEO Jennifer Martinez told industry publication Aviation Weekly. "Washington's technology offers a way to ensure our practices match our values, removing unconscious bias from the equation." The system used AI to standardize upgrade procedures, seating assignments, and service protocols, ensuring that factors like race, gender, or appearance couldn't influence these decisions. It included anonymized service quality metrics that measured whether all passengers received similar attention and assistance. Malcolm deliberately chose smaller airlines for the initial implementation, knowing that success stories from these carriers would create pressure on larger airlines to adopt similar measures. The strategy was working. When quarterly customer satisfaction scores showed significant improvements for both Horizon and Pacific Connect after just 1 month using the new system, other airlines took notice. Passengers were responding positively to the transparent, equitable approach to service. By the end of the month, Malcolm had been invited to speak at the International Air Transport Association's annual conference, a remarkable development given that he was essentially challenging the entire industry's status quo. His message remained consistent. This wasn't about punishing airlines, but transforming them. "The companies that embrace this change will thrive," he told the audience of airline executives. "Those that resist will increasingly find themselves unable to compete in a market where consumers demand both excellence and equality." As Malcolm left the stage to significant applause, notably stronger from younger executives, his phone buzzed with a notification. Skyline's board had called another emergency meeting. According to his sources, leadership change was on the agenda. Operation Altitude had created more turbulence than anyone could have anticipated, and the industry was still only beginning to adjust to the new altitude. 65 days after being denied his first-class seat, Malcolm Washington walked through the revolving doors of Skyline Airlines' corporate headquarters in Atlanta. The security guards at the front desk did a double-take as he approached. "Malcolm Washington for the board meeting," he stated, calmly presenting his identification. The guards exchanged nervous glances before one made a phone call. After a brief conversation, a harried-looking executive assistant appeared to escort Malcolm to the top floor. In the 6 weeks since launching Operation Altitude, Malcolm had methodically accumulated Skyline stock through various investment vehicles. His team had moved carefully to avoid triggering regulatory thresholds that would have alerted the company earlier. By the time Skyline realized what was happening, Malcolm's combined holdings represented nearly 11% of the airline, enough to demand a board meeting under the company's own bylaws. The assistant led Malcolm to an imposing boardroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline. Around a massive mahogany table sat the 12 members of Skyline's board with CEO Harrison Phillips at the head, his expression a mixture of irritation and disbelief. Mr. Washington, Phillips said, without standing, "This is highly irregular. While you've somehow managed to acquire enough shares to call this meeting, I'm not sure what you hope to accomplish." Malcolm took the empty seat at the opposite end of the table. I've come with a proposal that I believe will benefit Skyline's shareholders, employees, and passengers. I think that falls well within the purpose of a board meeting. Eleanor Phillips, seated to her cousin Harrison's right, leaned forward with interest. At 76, she rarely attended board meetings in person anymore, but she had made an exception today. As the granddaughter of Skyline's founder and a significant shareholder herself, her presence carried weight. "I'd like to hear Mr. Washington's proposal," she said firmly. With a nod of thanks to Eleanor, Malcolm opened his briefcase and distributed bound copies of a document titled Skyline Transformation Initiative. He remained standing as board members flipped through the pages. "Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm proposing is a comprehensive restructuring of Skyline's operational procedures, training protocols, and customer service approach. The goal is to eliminate discriminatory practices that have damaged this company's reputation and are now significantly harming its bottom line." Malcolm turned to a screen on the wall where his assistant had loaded a presentation. The first slide showed Skyline's stock performance over the past 2 months, a steep downward trajectory. "Since the incident involving my denied boarding, Skyline has lost 31% of its market value. 8 corporate clients representing over $40 million in annual revenue have canceled their contracts. Advance bookings are down 23% year over year." The board members shifted uncomfortably. These were numbers they knew all too well. The typical corporate response would be to wait out the storm, issue carefully worded apologies, and perhaps implement superficial diversity training. "I'm suggesting something far more substantive." Malcolm clicked to the next slide, which outlined his AI-driven customer service platform designed to eliminate bias from every customer touchpoint. This system, which is already being successfully piloted by 2 of your competitors, standardizes how upgrades are processed, how service is delivered, and how complaints are handled. It removes the subjective elements that allow bias to creep in while maintaining the high-touch service your premium customers expect. For the next 45 minutes, Malcolm presented data showing discrimination was hurting Skyline's bottom line across all demographics. Contrary to what some executives feared, the data showed that addressing these issues would likely increase revenue, not decrease it. Even passengers who benefit from current biases express discomfort when they observe discriminatory treatment, Malcolm explained. "Your own customer surveys show this, though the results were never elevated to board level." Several board members looked surprised at this revelation, glancing at Phillips questioningly. When Malcolm concluded his presentation, the room fell silent until board member Richard Daniels spoke. "While this is all very interesting, Mr. Washington, it seems like you're just seeking revenge for your personal experience. Why should we upend our entire operational model based on one incident?" Malcolm's expression remained professional, but his voice took on an edge of intensity. "This isn't about revenge, Mr. Daniels. It's about transformation. What happened to me wasn't one incident. It was a symptom of systemic issues that are costing this company millions. I'm offering a solution that addresses the root causes." "And what do you get out of this?" Phillips asked skeptically. "A better airline industry, a company that lives up to its marketing promises about treating all passengers with respect. And yes, a better return on my significant investment in Skyline stock." The discussion grew heated as several old guard board members resisted the implications of Malcolm's proposal. James Richardson, a 20-year board veteran, was particularly vocal. "You're just an outsider trying to force your way in. You don't understand our industry or our company culture." "If company culture means discriminating against passengers based on race, then perhaps that culture needs to change," Malcolm replied evenly. Richardson's face flushed. "This is ridiculous. You're just playing the race card because you didn't get the seat you wanted." The room fell silent at the outburst. Eleanor Phillips slowly stood up. "James, that comment was inappropriate and exactly illustrates the problem Mr. Washington is addressing." She turned to Malcolm. "I apologize for my colleague's remarks." Richardson began to protest, his voice rising. Phillips attempted to regain control of the meeting. "Let's all calm down. Mr. Washington, while we appreciate your input, this board has successfully guided Skyline for many years. We'll take your suggestions under advisement, but that's not good enough," Malcolm interrupted. Skyline is in crisis. Your stock is in free fall. Your reputation is damaged. I'm offering concrete solutions, and you're responding with the same dismissive attitude that created this situation. The tension in the room escalated until Phillips called for security. This meeting is getting out of hand. As a security officer entered the boardroom, Eleanor Phillips stood again. Harrison, if you have Mr. Washington removed, I will immediately call for a vote of no confidence in your leadership. The room froze. Eleanor rarely used her influence so directly. Harrison hesitated, then waved the security officer away. Eleanor addressed the board. My grandfather founded this airline with a simple principle. Every passenger deserves dignity. Somewhere along the way, we've lost sight of that. I've reviewed Mr. Washington's proposal thoroughly, and I believe it offers us a path forward. The next hour saw intense negotiation. Several board members gradually shifted from resistance to cautious interest as Malcolm addressed their concerns with data and specific implementation plans. Others remained opposed, seeing the changes as an admission of guilt. As the discussion reached a critical point, Malcolm delivered his final argument. You have two choices. Implement these changes voluntarily and be recognized as industry leaders in addressing a problem that affects every airline. Or continue to lose market share and eventually be forced to change anyway as regulations and passenger expectations evolve. He looked directly at Phillips. The question isn't whether the industry will change, it's whether Skyline will lead that change or be left behind. Phillips, seeing the shifting sentiment in the room, attempted one last defense. Implementation would be expensive and disruptive. Less expensive than bankruptcy, Eleanor responded dryly. After 6 hours of debate, the board finally voted. By a narrow margin of 7-5, they approved a modified version of Malcolm's plan. Harrison Phillips, seeing the writing on the wall, announced his resignation effective immediately. An interim leadership committee would be formed to guide the implementation process. As the meeting concluded, Malcolm declined the suggestion that he join Skyline's executive team. My goal was never to take over your airline, he explained. It was to transform it into what it always claimed to be, a company that treats every passenger with respect and dignity. As board members filed out, Eleanor Phillips approached Malcolm. That was quite something, Mr. Washington. My grandfather would have approved. She smiled slightly. And for what it's worth, so do I. Malcolm shook her hand. This is just the beginning, Miss Phillips. The real work starts now. As Malcolm left Skyline headquarters that evening, media had already gathered outside, alerted to the boardroom drama and Phillips' resignation. Rather than making a statement, Malcolm simply smiled and continued to his waiting car. Operation Altitude had achieved its first major milestone, but the journey toward true industry transformation was just taking off. The hardest part, implementation, still lay ahead. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation, Malcolm Washington found himself back at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, this time by invitation. Skyline Airlines was unveiling its completely redesigned terminal experience, the most visible aspect of the sweeping changes implemented under what the company now called its Equal Service Protocol. The transformation had been remarkable, both in its scope and in how quickly it had occurred once the decision was made. With Eleanor Phillips championing the changes from within and Malcolm providing technological expertise from outside, Skyline had gone from industry laggard to leader in addressing discriminatory practices. The first major change had been a comprehensive staff retraining program developed in partnership with respected diversity experts. Unlike traditional diversity training that often felt punitive and ineffective, this program focused on practical scenarios, behavioral psychology, and measurable outcomes. We're not asking employees to change their personal beliefs, explained Dr. Renee Taylor, the Harvard psychologist who had designed the program. We're giving them tools to ensure their actions and decisions align with our service standards regardless of those beliefs. Initial resistance from some longtime employees had gradually given way to acceptance and even enthusiasm as they saw the positive results. Customer complaints had decreased significantly, while compliments had risen across all demographic groups. The second pillar of the transformation was the implementation of Malcolm's technology. Skyline had completely overhauled its booking systems and service protocols to eliminate opportunities for bias. Seat assignments, upgrades, and service delivery were now handled through algorithms designed to ensure equity while still accounting for legitimate factors like frequent flyer status. The technology doesn't remove human judgment entirely, Malcolm explained to Aviation Weekly in a feature on the transformation. It simply ensures that judgment is applied consistently based on relevant factors rather than unconscious biases. Perhaps most significantly, the airline had made a commitment to transparency. When incidents did occur, as they occasionally still did, they were addressed openly rather than denied or minimized. This approach had initially worried some executives who feared admitting problems would create liability, but the opposite had proven true. Passengers responded positively to the honesty, and potential lawsuits often became opportunities for improvement instead. As Malcolm toured the redesigned terminal with Amara Johnson, who had been appointed as Skyline's first black female chief operating officer, he noticed subtle but important changes in how staff interacted with diverse passengers. There was a consistency to the service that had been missing before, a sense that every traveler was receiving the same level of respect and attention. The numbers tell the story, Amara said, showing Malcolm the latest customer satisfaction data on her tablet. Overall satisfaction scores are up 28%. Among minority passengers, they're up 46%. And financially, Malcolm asked, after the initial dip, our stock has not only recovered but gained 12% over pre-incident levels. It turns out treating people equally is good business. The third aspect of the transformation had been the most difficult but ultimately most impactful personnel changes. Employees who had been identified as consistently engaging in discriminatory behavior had been given opportunities to adapt to the new expectations. Some had embraced the change, others had chosen to leave. The resulting staff now better reflected the diversity of Skyline's passenger base at all levels of the organization. We lost some employees who couldn't or wouldn't adjust, Eleanor Phillips acknowledged during the terminal ribbon-cutting ceremony. But we've gained many more who are excited to be part of an airline that truly values every passenger. The success at Skyline had created a ripple effect throughout the industry. Malcolm's Fair Flight app had become a standard tool for travelers, allowing them to report their experiences in real time. Airlines quickly learned that discriminatory incidents would be documented and shared widely, creating powerful incentives for change. The Transportation Department, responding to growing public pressure, had adopted new regulations based on the equal altitude standards, requiring all airlines to implement anti-discrimination measures with specific metrics and reporting. Requirements. Malcolm's original business had flourished in unexpected ways. Quantum Leap Technologies had established a new division focused on equity solutions across various industries. The transportation algorithm that had brought him to San Francisco on that fateful day had been successfully implemented by multiple airlines, including the very carrier he had originally traveled to, Pitch. Sometimes the path to success isn't what you expect, Malcolm told a group of MIT students during a guest lecture. I went to San Francisco to sell an efficiency algorithm. Instead, I ended up transforming an entire industry's approach to human dignity. The industry publications that had initially described Malcolm as an angry customer seeking revenge now routinely included him in lists of the most influential figures in aviation. His insistence that the changes weren't about punishing airlines, but improving them, had gradually won over even skeptical executives. As Malcolm prepared to board a Skyline flight to Chicago for a transportation equity conference, he experienced the transformed system firsthand. The check-in process was efficient and respectful. Security screening, while still thorough, was conducted with professionalism and consistency across all passengers. At the gate, the boarding process was orderly and transparent. When Malcolm presented his first-class boarding pass, the gate agent, a young black woman who had joined Skyline during the transformation, scanned it efficiently. "Thank you, Mr. Washington." "Enjoy your flight," she said, with a genuine smile that carried no surprise or suspicion at his presence in first class. As he settled into his seat, Malcolm found a handwritten note from Eleanor Phillips. "Thank you for helping us become the airline my grandfather always intended. The skies are more equal because of you." Looking out the window as the plane taxied for takeoff, Malcolm reflected on the unexpected journey of the past year. What had begun as a humiliating incident had catalyzed changes that would benefit millions of travelers for years to come. The transformation wasn't perfect, no human system ever could be, but it represented genuine progress. And that Malcolm thought as the plane accelerated down the runway was worth far more than one first-class seat. 1 year to the day after being denied his first-class seat, Malcolm Washington found himself once again boarding a Skyline Airlines flight. This time, however, everything was different. As he approached the Skyline counter at San Francisco International Airport, Malcolm noticed the immediate transformation in the service culture. The staff behind the desk represented diverse backgrounds, all wearing new Skyline uniforms featuring a subtle equal altitude pin, now the internationally recognized symbol for bias-free service that had spread far beyond the airline industry. "Good morning, Mr. Washington," the check-in agent greeted him professionally. "Will you be checking any bags today?" There was no surprise in her voice at his first-class ticket, no subtle scrutiny of his identity or belongings, just efficient, respectful service delivered with the same attention she provided to every passenger. The security process, while still thorough, proceeded with remarkable consistency. Malcolm observed TSA agents following standardized protocols for all travelers, with random additional screenings now truly randomized through an automated system rather than subject to individual discretion. At the gate, the transformation was perhaps most visible. Digital displays clearly showed the boarding process with transparent rules. Gate agents processed passengers with uniform efficiency, regardless of appearance or background. The algorithm-driven system Malcolm had designed ensured that when exceptions or special accommodations were needed, they were granted based on objective criteria rather than subjective judgments. As first-class boarding was announced, Malcolm approached the gate with a sense of déjà vu, but this time his boarding pass was scanned, without question, his path to his rightful seat unimpeded. Settling into 2A, Malcolm reflected on the extraordinary year that had passed. What had begun as a personal humiliation had evolved into a movement that transformed not just one airline, but an entire industry's approach to equality and service. The flight attendant approaching his seat was Jasmine Powell, a young black woman who had joined Skyline during the wave of hiring that accompanied the airline's transformation. "Mr. Washington," she said with genuine warmth, "it's an honor to have you on board. Can I offer you a pre-departure beverage?" After serving his sparkling water, Jasmine lingered briefly. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I wanted to thank you. I applied to 3 airlines before Skyline. The others rejected me, despite my qualifications. Skyline's new hiring practices are the reason I have this job." "How has the experience been?" Malcolm asked. "Transformative," she replied. "The training is rigorous but fair. The service protocols are clear. And most importantly, I don't have to worry about being judged by different standards than my colleagues. We're all evaluated on the same metrics." Malcolm nodded, gratified to hear firsthand confirmation of the changes he had helped initiate. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Malcolm received a text message from Eleanor Phillips, who had formally taken over as chairperson of Skyline's board 6 months earlier, landing in Chicago in an hour. "Would you have time for coffee before your next meeting? There's something important I'd like to discuss." Malcolm confirmed the meeting and returned to reviewing the industry-wide data his team had compiled for today's Transportation Consortium presentation. The numbers were remarkable. Discrimination incidents reported through the FairFlight app had decreased by 78% across all major carriers. Customer satisfaction scores had improved significantly, particularly among minority passengers. Most tellingly, airlines that had embraced the equal altitude standards had outperformed their more resistant competitors financially, proving that ethical practices and profitability could go hand in hand. After landing in Chicago, Malcolm met Eleanor at an airport cafe. At 77, she carried herself with the dignity of someone who had witnessed aviation history from its golden age through its darkest struggles to its current evolution. "I wanted to share something with you," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "These are the original service guidelines my grandfather wrote when he founded Skyline in 1946. Notice this passage." Malcolm read the highlighted section. "Every passenger who boards our aircraft deserves to be treated with equal dignity and respect. The sky recognizes no distinctions of race, creed, or status. Neither should we." "Your grandfather was ahead of his time," Malcolm observed. "Yes, and somewhere along the way, we lost sight of his vision. You helped us reclaim it." Eleanor sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "The consortium is considering you for chairperson of their ethics committee. I thought you should know I've recommended you without reservation." Later that afternoon, Malcolm delivered his presentation to the Transportation Consortium, a powerful alliance of airlines, rail companies, and other transportation providers. His primary topic was the efficiency algorithm he had originally traveled to San Francisco to pitch a year ago, the presentation that had been postponed due to the discriminatory incident. "The data is clear," Malcolm concluded. "This system can reduce fuel consumption by 11% while improving on-time performance by 14%. The environmental and financial benefits are substantial." The contract the consortium offered exceeded even his most optimistic projections. As Malcolm signed the agreement, he reflected on how his business journey had come full circle. The deal he had originally sought was now just one part of a much larger transformation. That evening, Malcolm received a message from Dr. James Turner, the mentor who had advised him that sometimes you must force change. "I saw your presentation on the live stream," Dr. Turner wrote. "You didn't just take your seat, Malcolm, you rebuilt the plane. More importantly, you changed who gets to fly it." After returning to his hotel, Malcolm finalized plans for his newest initiative, the Washington Foundation for Transportation Equity, which would provide scholarships and mentorship for minority students pursuing careers in aviation and other transportation fields. The foundation would be funded by a portion of the profits from his newest business division, which specialized in equity solutions across industries. As Malcolm looked out his hotel window at the Chicago skyline, he thought about the young woman whose simple question about his denied boarding had sparked a viral video. About Tamara Johnson, who had gone from consultant to Skyline COO. About the thousands of travelers who would never know discrimination in the skies because of changes set in motion by one humiliating incident. The journey had been unexpected and challenging, but the destination, a more equitable horizon, was worth every turbulent moment. Malcolm had always believed that technology could solve complex problems. But this experience had taught him something more profound. When technology was combined with moral courage and strategic thinking, it could transform not just processes, but people and institutions. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Other industries still harbored the same biases that had once permeated aviation. But tonight Malcolm allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The sky, as Eleanor's grandfather had written, recognized no distinctions, and now neither did those who navigated it. Malcolm Washington's journey teaches us that true change requires strategic action, not just righteous anger. By combining legal pressure, technological innovation, and corporate engagement, he created a multifaceted approach that couldn't be dismissed or ignored. This demonstrates how systemic discrimination requires systemic solutions. The story shows that when facing injustice, our greatest power lies not in emotional reactions, but in thoughtful responses that leverage our unique skills and resources. Malcolm used his technological expertise and business acumen to address discrimination in ways others couldn't. We learned that allies matter enormously. Without Eleanor Phillips supporting from within, external pressure alone might have failed. Finding common ground with those inside the system can accelerate transformation. Perhaps most importantly, the narrative proves that discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's bad business. Companies that embraced equality outperformed those that resisted, demonstrating that inclusive practices drive financial success. Malcolm's story reminds us that sometimes our greatest contributions come from how we respond when injustice derails our original plans. By transforming personal humiliation into industry-wide reform, he showed that a single, determined individual can reshape entire systems when they refuse to accept the status quo. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wished you could make real change? Share your experiences in the comments. If Malcolm's strategic approach inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories, transformation, and justice. Don't forget to share this video with someone fighting their own battles against discrimination. Sometimes knowing others have succeeded gives us the courage to continue. Thank you for joining us on this journey. And remember, the path to equality is built one bold action at a time.